pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roll with Atlantic.
Water towers, fly!
Flight downside, FPD off. FPD off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to NASA Spaceflight, where we are live once again with more spaceflight news to cover. My name is Thomas Burkhart. I'm an editor and reporter for NASA Spaceflight, and you are looking live at Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket is preparing to launch the Starlink version 1 L24 mission, 60 more Starlink satellites bound for low Earth orbit. We've been busy here at NASA Spaceflight just today, and then the last couple days. We had Starship coverage earlier. We had a Delta IV Heavy launch earlier this week. Other Starship stuff. So yeah, we've got a lot of stuff to cover. But we are here for our Falcon 9 launch tonight. On a very busy night, we've got an Arianespace Vega rocket, which went off earlier in the evening, and also a Chinese launch is going off just shortly before this one here. But we are live here for Cape Canaveral, and we've got a couple other people joining me here on the stream. First and foremost, Julia Bergeron, do we have you on comms tonight?
Why, yes, you do, Thomas. Good evening, everyone. I am a fleet chaser and photographer for NASA Spaceflight, and today I am coming to you from, I guess we'll say, the Indian River Lagoon. Not my usual spot on US 1, but a little different spot tonight.
Awesome. Also on comms in the studio, we've got Mr. Michael Baylor. Michael, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, and hopefully we will see a nice clear skies liftoff of Falcon 9 and get some beautiful views as it ascends towards orbit.
Awesome. And then also not on the live stream comms, but really quick next to me here on the ITL Causeway at Cape Canaveral, we've got another photographer, Mr. Stephen Marr. Stephen, yell hi so they can hear you. There he is.
I did not hear that, but Steven is out.
Oh, no. They didn't pick it up. All right, I promise you Stephen Marr is out here as well. So we got the NASA Spaceflight team out in full force tonight. And right now, let's see, I gotta check my countdown timer. We are at T-minus 44 minutes and counting. So we are coming up on the start of tonight's countdown. SpaceX team's preparing to begin fuel loading operations. That'll begin at T-minus 35 minutes. So we're just under 10 minutes away from fueling for tonight's launch. The liftoff is targeted for 11:44 p.m. Eastern Time, or 03:44 UTC, and it's effectively an instantaneous launch window because this is going to a very precise orbital plane, as most Starlink missions do. So any holds during the countdown would cause a delay for a backup launch attempt. However, nothing being tracked at this point. Weather looks beautiful, mostly clear skies here tonight, and not too windy, so weather should not be a problem. Also, no technical items being worked as far as we're aware. SpaceX saying that everything should be on track up until this point. We'll have more updates as we get closer to propellant load start. Over the course of the webcast, if you've got any questions about what's going on, feel free to throw those into chat. And if you tag us with @NASASpaceflight, we'll be able to see those questions and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can about tonight's launch and everything SpaceX and everything space. So feel free to throw some questions our way as we get towards the beginning of our countdown. Julia, want to give us a brief overview of the mission? I know you're the fleet expert, and of course the fleet is heavily involved tonight.
Oh, yes, yes, it is. It was actually, there was a little bit of excitement leading up to this launch, and the fleet is actually kind of why we were delayed into later into Wednesday. Originally, the window would have opened just after midnight today. It got pushed to, it is 11:44, if I'm correct, and we're flying booster 1060 for the 7th time, and it is hoping to land on Just Read the Instructions. Now, about that, Just Read the Instructions got there earlier today after Tug Hawk had a breakdown and mechanical failure. Hawk has now gimped over to the port of Jacksonville for repairs, and there was a rescue mission of sorts to grab Just Read the Instructions. So Finn Falgout had just come back from mission and delivering the Crew 2 booster, and they had to turn around before nightfall and go and get Just Read the Instructions to pull it out to the landing zone. So Whatever happened out there got a little dicey, but here we are. The fleet is ready. The rocket's ready. The weather seems to be ready. The moon is full and hopefully out of my frame for the photo. Um, so here we are. Just read the instructions seems to be operating well enough. And I had a thought about what was going on out there when we had mechanical failure. Tug Hawk was going maybe between 1 and 2 knots. But just read the instructions is kind of sort of a brick out there at sea. Once they were detached from just read the instructions, they were able to go about 7 knots. So I know a question some might have is, why didn't SpaceX just throw the thrusters on, just read the instructions, put those down, you know, give it a little bit of a lift to make it to the landing zone a little faster? Maybe we could have made launch a little earlier today, right?
Right. Originally, it
And
was actually targeted for 12:05 a.m. this morning, so it was kind of delayed
mhm,
24 hours, but the launch date didn't technically change because it went to the other side of midnight. But yeah, I gotcha.
right. And you know, wouldn't that have been cool if just read the instructions kind of could have motored itself out there? And then
It
I
would have
thought
been cool
about
for
that.
sure.
It would have used the fuel it needed to station keep for launch. So I don't think they put enough fuel on board to really make a journey quite that far yet. So so here we are. We had to wait for some tugs to do some missions to rescue it and get in place in time. I'm glad
Now,
that Finn had enough time in port that they could just turn around and go help out.
so just read the instructions now in position downrange to the northeast of Cape Canaveral. Again, this mission starting from pad 40, which is the further south of the 2 pads here at Cape Canaveral that SpaceX uses. Of course, the other 39A recently hosted the Crew 2 mission, so they are working on turning that pad around for future missions. There'll be another Starlink mission from that pad in the not too distant future as SpaceX kind of ramps back up to Starlink launch mode here at the Space Coast. Also, Julia, correct me if I'm wrong, Shelia Bordelon, the fairing recovery vessel, should also be downrange tonight, correct?
That is correct. Basically, there is just about nothing left in port right now except for Go Searcher. So, Sheila Bordelon is about 100 kilometers away to the northeast of the booster landing zone. So, roughly 725, 730 kilometers to the northeast of us here.
Like go flashing fleet cam on your screens right now. That is, of course, I Still Love You, which recently returned the Crew 2 booster back to port. And like Julie said, that's one of the only things left in port right now. The rest of the fleet out on mission for Starlink tonight.
You know, even the booster's gone.
Yep, even the
That's
booster's
down,
gone.
gone, and back on base. Yeah.
So that's kind of our status update as far as this launch goes. Again, we are about 4 minutes or so before fueling should begin. We should have the countdown audio coming into our stream, so we will hear them confirm that they are on track to begin propellant load within the next couple of minutes. But until that point, Michael, do we have any questions that we can talk about?
Yes, we have lots of questions and lots of super chats. If you have a question, please tag us in chat at NASASpaceflight, and we'll try to get through as many questions as we can throughout the next 38 minutes until liftoff. We also have the SpaceX mission control net being piped in, so if we hear any callouts, you should hear those on our stream, assuming that the audio is loud enough, because sometimes SpaceX's net is pretty quiet on volume, but we have it turned up as much as possible. But to start Super Chats, Musical Wolves says record of SpaceX activity in 1 week. I don't know. What do you think, Thomas?
Well, let's see. We only had one. Well, all right. So hold on. Crew 2 was like last week, right? Yeah, that wasn't this week. So I mean, it's close. We've had a couple like orbital SpaceX launches within a couple days before, but of course, Starship doing some static fire testing. If Starship flies on Friday, I would say this week it might set a record. But regardless, they've been pretty busy as they have been most of the year.
Yeah, and I mean, there is also the upcoming undocking and landing of the Crew 1. So
That is true. That is coming up undocking Friday and splashdown Saturday, if I remember correctly. So that is also coming up. That's a good point.
And then Lex says, busy day, thanks for the coverage. busy day today and a busy day tomorrow morning as well. We are not getting much sleep. I know. If you're wondering why Chris G is not out there, why is Chris G not out there, Thomas?
Because Chris G has to be back at the Kennedy Space Center early tomorrow morning for the offload of the Artemis 1 SLS core stage just to the north of me right now over in the turn basin near the vehicle assembly building. So NASASpaceflight will be live once again in about, I'm going to do math in my head, a little less than 6 hours, I think. It depends. The schedule's a little fluid, but it could be very early tomorrow morning for an SLS live stream as they continue to prepare for the all-important Artemis 1 mission. So yeah, Christy, you'll hear from Christy in a few hours, everybody.
And Julia, the core stage for SLS came to KSC on a barge. So it's not just SpaceX has a fleet. A lot of rocket companies have a fleet, believe it or not.
That is true. So a tug brought Pegasus, which is the modified barge that NASA uses, and it was part of the shuttle program. It had to be elongated for the SLS program, and they squeezed the core stage into there, brought it via a ocean-faring tug up to Port Canaveral. People got to gaze at it a little bit until they were done switching over to the river tugs. It took the journey the rest of the way through port and the lock, and then back up to the Banana River and the turn basin, which is where you guys saw Chris streaming from. So that's super exciting. There's that fleet, the SpaceX fleet. It's just been really busy in port and just really busy getting ready for crew to depart as well.
And we're coming up on T-minus 35 minutes, so the launch director for this launch should be confirming that they're go to enter the countdown. And we are standing by to hear that call out. If we do hear that call out, hopefully we will, but the T-minus 35 minute mark is when Falcon 9 enters the terminal countdown for a launch and propellant loading begins. Steve says, thanks for the hard work to bring us all this coverage. Rough Rider says, update on what happened to the old tug. I'm not sure which tug they're referring to, Julia. Any ideas?
Are we talking about Tug Hawk, perhaps? That was the tug that brought them out originally. What happened is...
Sorry, we just got to call out that the launch auto sequence has started. That was a super quiet call out. Their nets are once again almost impossible to hear. Let me know if you heard that in chat, but I barely heard it.
I heard it barely, but I did make out that the launch auto sequence has started, so propellant loading about to begin, actually has begun for Falcon 9. RP1 kerosene and liquid oxygen now flowing into Falcon 9.
Yeah, I have it turned up well over 100% on our end, so go ahead, Julia.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I totally didn't hear it on my end, but I'm hearing the lapping of waves. So what happened is kind of unclear. All we know is mechanical issues. Judging by the tracking, it looked for the most part that they were idling and just kind of keeping the drone ship with the swells. Outside of that, they had enough to get to Jacksonville, but it was kind of a staggered ride in. So maybe they were only running on one engine. And when you're talking about a drone ship, like just read the instructions, that one actually is a little harder to pull than, of course, I Still Love You because of those thruster pods. So it's more like a brick. So when you have limited engines to work off of, you really kind of struggle out there. And it's unclear whether or not perhaps GoQuest or Finn Falgout brought some parts to them, but whatever happened, they made it safely to port to the north of us, and hopefully we'll see them back soon for another mission, and hopefully this engine failure, you know, still holds with their contract. So we're going to have to see what happens with them in the end. Either way, I think, don't we have another drone ship hopefully coming soon? I really hope, because there's an octograbber being made for a shortfall of gravitas over on Sideco Road, which leads me to think maybe we'll see another drone ship soon. So we definitely need more tugs.
I sure hope so.
I don't know. I'm keeping an eye on that. Yeah. So we'll see.
Aline, I hope I'm saying that right. Probably not, but hello from Brazil. Glad you like the stream. Greg says, Julia rocks. She's a great addition to the NASA spaceflight team. Thanks for the kind words towards Julia, Greg.
I thank you, Greg.
And let's get to some questions. Why don't they put engines onto drone ships, Julia?
Well, they technically do have engines. They have really big engines, actually, to drive those thrusters. Well, ultimately, I do believe Elon is working toward having drone ships that can self-propel themselves to and from the landing zone, because that would probably help their cadence, maybe help the bottom line. Whether or not these are fully capable of having enough fuel and being able to guide themselves, well, okay, with the help of maybe somebody from Hawthorne, right? Using dynamic positioning systems. Um, that's kind of also up to the Coast Guard, wouldn't you guys think? Uh, how comfortable are they with an autonomous ship going out there? Will something always have to shadow it? What if something happened to the engines while it was going out and they didn't have somebody shadowing it? So um, they may be working toward that, and they may be working with the Coast Guard on what those guidelines might look like. I don't think there's necessarily anything stopping them, but maybe testing it out at this point. It's just not something they've pursued yet.
Why do they prefer late night Starlink launches, Thomas?
So they don't. I don't think they do. I think they would rather not be up at these hours for all these launches. However, the reason they conduct these launches at these times of day is purely a matter of physics and orbital mechanics. Basically, in order to reach a certain orbit, you have to launch when that plane, the plane that orbit resides in, is directly over your launch site. So, in order to reach the orbital plane they're targeting tonight, that plane passes over Cape Canaveral at 11:44 p.m. Eastern Time. So, but all that being said, whatever orbit they need to fill with Starlink satellites determines when the launch time is. It would be a lot more convenient if they could launch in the middle of the day, but until then, because the orbit that they're trying to fill tonight doesn't pass over Cape Canaveral in the middle of the day, they got to launch at night. A lot of the orbital launches you see are going to very specific orbits. You're going to the International Space Station or something like that. They also have launch times that are dictated by whatever orbit you're going into. The only time you can really mess with it is if you're going to like a geostationary orbit, because then you get a nice long window, because the point you're going to orbits, or not orbits, excuse me, rotates with the Earth. So you have a little more leeway on those kind of launches. But for these launches to low Earth orbit with a very specific orbital plane in mind, you have a very strict launch window. It's instantaneous almost always, and a lot of times it ends up being in the middle of the night. So these Starlink launches have just been going to those kind of orbits recently. There was a daytime Starlink launch not too long ago, but yeah, a lot of them have been nighttime launches, and that's just a matter of how the physics works out.
Can I ask another question to add on to that to you, Thomas?
Always.
Okay, so my question is, as we get farther into Starlink launches, we're on launch 24 now, of
Yep.
how many launches by chance?
So, all right, off the top of my head, and you would think someone who edited the launch article for this mission will remember, I think there's two or three launches for the initial shell, maybe 3 or 4 for the initial shell left. But other than that, beyond that, there's going to be other shells at different altitudes and stuff to fill with Starlink satellites. In fact, SpaceX was recently granted permission to put some of those future satellites into some lower orbits as they continue to kind of design how they want their constellation to operate. So
Okay.
there's 3 or 4 in this initial shell, but then a bunch more after that. So we've got a few to go.
So as we do the bunch more after that, is it going to be harder to thread the needle with all of these Starlink satellites there, or is it really not much different than it is now?
It shouldn't be too much of a difference. There is some increase. But basically, every time you conduct an orbital launch, you conduct what's called a collision on launch assessment, or a COLA, which basically takes a look at your launch trajectory and where you'll enter orbit, and figures out are you going to be too close to anything that's already in orbit. These happen all the time. It's been a standard part of launching rockets for years. When we are increasing the number of satellites in low Earth orbit, there will be an increase in these periods where you might be blacked out from launching. However, when I say an increase, these things are incredibly rare to begin with. Space is huge, and you pretty much have to be trying to hit something in orbit. It's pretty hard to hit anything because there's a lot of empty space, even with thousands and thousands of satellites, like are planned for a lot of these low Earth orbit constellations. Starlink, Amazon's Project Kuiper, Telesat has a constellation. There's OneWeb. So with all of those, even with all of those, it won't be too difficult to continue launching into space. There's a lot of space up there, no pun intended. Shouldn't be too big of a problem. You might see a slight increase in those kind of conflicts, but it shouldn't. It's not really forecasted to have a major impact.
All right,
Yes.
that answers my question. Thank you.
Of
We are
course.
getting a lot of questions about the Chinese space station segment. It's about to launch. We are aware of that. If you follow at NASASpaceflight on Twitter, we have some coverage of that there. We also have an article on our website, but we do not yet have live stream cameras in China. That might be a future
Unfortunately.
upgrade if somebody wants to help us out on that, but this stream is for coverage, clearly, of the SpaceX Starlink launch that is going to take place in just about 26 minutes, and the first stage is B1060, which is making its 7th flight, and like Julia mentioned, it will be landing on the drone ship. So looking forward to hopefully seeing a cool landing, and hopefully SpaceX will get some good live views off of that drone ship as Falcon 9 touches down. But a couple more questions. Which ship is picking up Crew 1, Julia?
Well, that will be determined closer to their departure. It will depend on weather. Well, it depends on more than weather, but so we have Ghost Searcher stationed in Port Canaveral right now, and they will be covering the East Coast. West Coast is Go Navigator, and historically, Go Navigator has gotten all of the recoveries so far. My understanding is it is probably a rare treat for us to get one in the Atlantic. The conditions just seem to end up being better in the Gulf for their departure and to time a landing there. And not going to lie, the weather, as far as being out at sea, is probably usually better in the Gulf than the Atlantic, as we found the Atlantic is kind of hard for sea state. So at the moment, I'm predicting Go Navigator, and I've already seen at least one keep out alert from the Gulf. And as it stands at the moment, we have a 2-mile keep out zone that the Coast Guard will be enforcing for that recovery and splashdown. So if there's any boaters out there on this stream who think they want to see that, that would be a cool thing to see, but I really advise you not to do that. Please don't do that. There's lots of factors going into a splashdown, and wayward boats is the last thing they need to worry about. So you can go ahead and watch that live stream, though. That's pretty cool.
And Matthew, thank you for the super chat. What temperatures does the fuel of the rocket get chilled to? Thomas, good luck.
Oh, thanks for tossing that one my way. Oh, man. All right, if I was in front of a computer, I could probably Google and find you the answer. But unfortunately, off the top of my head, I don't have those numbers. What I can
It's
tell you
super
is that
chill.
it's very, very cold.
It's colder
can
than just
tell you-
logs.
Yeah, what I can tell you is, so both of the propellants are in liquid form. Obviously, one of the propellants is kerosene, which is liquid at ambient temperatures, so nothing too fancy there. However, they also chill the kerosene so that it's even denser, effectively fitting more energy into the same size propellant tanks. So it is colder than ambient temperature, and then of course oxygen is not liquid at ambient temperature, so they have to chill that down so that it stays in liquid form and is also nice and dense. So they are both at what we call cryogenic temperatures, which is just very, very cold, basically. If you Google what temperature rocket propellants are at, you might find the answer. I don't know if the answer is specific to how SpaceX operates is out there. But off the top of my head, I don't have any numbers for you, but it's very, very cold. And that's why when we look at the rocket right now, you can see some vapors from the side. Of course, the rocket is actually behind the transporter erector right now, but you can still see some vapors coming off as the rocket begins to fill with propellant. Those super cold propellants are causing the air around the rocket to condense, and you're just seeing water vapor on the outside. because of how cold the rocket is. So that gives you an idea at least.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the exact number of the super chilled propellant that SpaceX uses is. That's
I'm not sure anyone outside SpaceX may know, so that might not be public information anyway.
Jim says another great stream. Thanks for the support, Jim. And the Journey Bunch says thank you for all you do. I'm a professional video editor, so if your team ever needs any free help, I would love to get involved in the future of space exploration. Thank you for the support. And I think Chris B has open DMs. Might have not been supposed to say that, but I think he has open DMs on
Too
Twitter.
late now.
Not my problem, right?
Nope.
Do you think I could get a good view from North Carolina? Asks Cristiano Thomas. Any ideas?
I bet that you could, assuming that the weather is clear where you are. Obviously, I can't see all the way to North Carolina from here, but it's very clear down here. If it is the same up where you are, look out to the east by the ocean, and you might not only see the normal launch and the ascent, but it is possible you might catch a glimpse of a re-entry burn, because the drone ship is stationed off the coast of the Carolinas, obviously out in the ocean. I don't think you'd be able to see a landing burn even from the coast, but if you're in the Carolinas or Georgia, you should be looking out to the east tonight because you might catch a glimpse of this rocket. It is flying to the northeast from Florida, right along the coast. So there's a very decent chance you might.
Cool. So
I think I've seen some great second stage pictures from the Carolina area too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you're right, Julia. For the last Crew 1 or Crew 2 launch, where there was the ascent into sunlight. People in North Carolina got a pretty good view of the second stage. There won't be, this is not the right time of day. We just heard a call out there for the fuel load as we see the T-minus 20-minute vent, but this is not the right time of day for the second stage to ascend into sunlight, but you should still see the second stage engine glowing against the dark sky. So still worth a shot, I think.
Absolutely.
And did you hear that call out, Thomas? I'm not sure if that came through my other feed or the actual stream.
I heard it.
Okay, good. Making sure. I did boost the audio, so let me know if it was better that time, chat.
Yeah, I think it was a little better. What that call out was for was the completion of RP1 kerosene loading into the upper stage. What you're seeing now is the ground equipment on the transporter or Erector being purged with nitrogen, and those lines will now be cleared out so they can begin liquid oxygen loading into the second stage. And that's what occurs every launch in that T-minus 20 minutes. That's a very nominal, completely normal event, and just another sign that the fueling timeline is proceeding perfectly.
And another super chat from Brandon, watching with my 6-year-old who wants to know how many rockets have landed ever. Thanks for all you guys do. Love watching you stream, and I am going to get you that number right now.
It's in the 70s still, I think, or are we in the 80s now? Are we talking about landed rockets?
SpaceX has recovered 79 Falcon 9s, and they have landed 80 because the Falcon Heavy Center Core on the Aerosat 6A mission landed and then tipped over shortly after landing. So this would be the 81st landing and the 80th recovery if Falcon 9 successfully lands on the drone ship and then is safely brought back to port. Of course, in terms of all rockets ever, the space shuttle was also reusable, so that number, if you want to add that on, that would increase things further. But for Falcon 9, it is 80 landings and 79 recoveries.
Of course, that's on missions, and if you're counting all the space shuttles that have come back to land as landed rockets, which of course these space shuttles, the orbiters themselves were rocket powered, they were one of these stages, so that would give you 133 additional landings. However, if we're talking about how many rockets, as in how many vehicles have landed, you've got 5 shuttle orbiters and then however many Falcon 9 boosters, which the number would actually be way less. I don't know I would be interested to know how many Falcon 9 boosters have flown and landed ever. That would be a different.
I could get that number, but it's going to take me too much time than I have
Yeah,
time for. So, sell it on. Thank you for the membership. And a couple of regular questions. The ULA had a chart showing where the launch would be visible from for NROL 82. The SpaceX has something similar, Thomas.
I don't think I've ever seen SpaceX put out a visual like that. I know exactly what the charts you're talking about. I don't think one exists for a SpaceX launch. I also don't know, Michael, are there any, does Heavens Above or does Flight Club do like visible from certain spots? Like, could we recommend a place to check that out?
Yes, Flight Club, I believe, does. I don't know exactly where to find it on that website, but check out flightclub.io to see where the launch is going. But generally, anyone in the southeast portion of the United States probably has a decent chance, especially if you're along the eastern coast, of seeing this. Maybe from like North Carolina down towards Florida, you'll have a pretty good chance of seeing it. Perhaps further to North Carolina. I think Ian in Pennsylvania has seen them a couple of times, so it really depends. But if you're on the eastern portion of the United States, it does not hurt to try.
We can report really quickly that the first module of the new Chinese space station has lifted off. So we'll keep giving you some major updates on that as they come through. But that's another launch with that, of course. We don't have our own camera in China, unfortunately, but we are here on Cape Canaveral and we'll keep you updated. And also, of course, continuing coverage over at NASASpaceflight.com of everything.
Are dark sats, non-reflective Starlink satellites still being used, or did SpaceX stop with them?
All Starlink satellites that are being launched today and for the foreseeable future do have the new visors and the new other adjustments. I believe they might have made a couple other tiny tweaks to make the satellites less visible. So that's a standard Starlink satellite configuration now. They'll keep doing that for the foreseeable future.
I think they settled on the visor design, not the darker paint design, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, gotcha. And yeah, Danny confirms in our back channel. So yeah, they've all got the visors that could prevent the sunlight from reflecting off of the nice flat surface on the bottom of the satellite.
Orget, I hope I'm saying that right, says, greetings from a small town in PA. A few years ago, I skipped school to watch a SpaceX launch. I have never, ever done that. I wanted to know what the target altitude they're going for is. Danny, tell us the target altitude, because Danny will know that number if you don't.
I know the operational altitude is 550 kilometers, but they get deployed into a lower orbit so that the satellites can drift across some orbital planes and then raise up. And Danny tells us that the initial insertion orbit will be approximately 250 by 280 kilometers, so a ever so slightly elliptical orbit. But that's your initial altitude. Again, those satellites will then maneuver up to 550 kilometers after launch. Thanks, Danny, for the fact check there.
Danny is the Starlink guru. Robbie, thank you so much for the very generous $50. Thank you for all you do. My nephew, Abe, who is 4, loves watching rockets and has told my mom he is going to be on a rocket someday. Take him to the Space Center for the first time next month, and I already have tears in my eyes. That is going to be exciting. Kennedy Space Center's visitor complex, I cannot recommend more. It is about 10 times more entertaining than Disney World. I can guarantee you that.
True.
So if you're coming to Florida and you have a choice between Disney World and Kennedy Space Center, go to the place with less crowds and cooler stuff. It is a no-brainer.
And also make sure you see the Atlantis exhibit. It's the most important part.
Yes, if you go there without seeing the Atlantis exhibit, something has gone horribly wrong. Thomas, thank you so much for the super chat. Different Thomas, I hope.
I'm not super chatting from here, I promise.
With Soyuz, Shenzhou, I don't know how to say that. I don't speak Chinese well at all.
Shenzhou, I believe, the Western pronunciation.
And 2 Crew Dragons in October. The record for the number of people in space will likely be broken from 13 to 14 by my count. That would be cool.
Yep, so we'll have we'll have 4 members on this. Well, the space and crew will be 7 baseline, and you'll have 3 Chinese astronauts, so you'll get up to 10. But then during the next direct handover, well, all right, the record's currently 13. Yeah. So Inspiration 4 will break because there'll be 4 crew members on Inspiration 4. They won't be on station, but they'll be in space. So yeah, the record will rise to 14 unless schedules change as always. But that will be a new record, correct?
How can we find inclination of these launches? SpaceX has to publish all the exact orbital information so that astronomers know where these satellites are to help them mitigate the damage for their observations. So I think Celeste Track on Twitter will publish the details to every Starlink launch. But all of these Starlink missions are standard. They're going to a, I do not want to get this wrong, 53-degree inclination. I always mistake the ISS inclination and the Starlink inclination because they are very close. They're almost exactly identical, but this is going to a 53 inclination orbit for today's launch, and that is standard across the board for Starlink so far. However, we will see polar Starlink launches in the future as SpaceX looks to increase their coverage over the poles. And I'm going to look into one thing, so Thomas, take it away for a second.
Sure. So right now, to give a brief status update, we are at just about T-minus 10 minutes and counting. Final propel load will continue up until about 2.5 minutes before liftoff. At T-minus 7 minutes, we'll hit another milestone in the countdown as they begin to chill the 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage, basically pumping just a little bit of that super cold liquid oxygen through the plumbing so that the engine components cool down, so when the full flow goes through them at ignition, they're not thermally shocked and damaged by that. So that'll be a milestone again that's at T-minus 7 minutes, and then we'll be counting down to the final T-minus 1 minute mark where Falcon 9 takes over control of the countdown, pressurizes the tanks for flight levels, etc. And that'll be our last kind of major milestone before liftoff. Engine start command goes at T-minus 3 seconds, and then we'll be lifting off from here at pad 40 to head out northeast on the way to orbit. Right now everything is on track, no weather or technical items being tracked. And yeah, so far everything appears nominal and on track for an on-time launch. Again, that liftoff is 11:44 p.m. Eastern Time, so just about 10 minutes from now.
Cool, and a couple more questions to throw your way while we wait. Let's see, trying to find one on topic. Can Melbourne, Florida see the launch? I think so. That's pretty close.
You're pretty much just barely south of the Space Center. So if you look out to the east, northeast, you should catch a very good view of the launch. You're pretty close to the Space Center here. So absolutely, look northeast. You should get a good view. Basically, you can go even further south. You can go down to like Palm Beach, Florida. Even if you're that far south, you should still be able to see pretty much anything that lifts off from Cape Canaveral. And then again, if you go up to places like Jacksonville, any launch that goes from Kennedy Space Center or Cape Canaveral, you should be able to catch the initial liftoff. Beyond that, kind of depends on the rocket's trajectory. Again, today it's going to the northeast, which means if you're in Georgia, the Carolinas, Virginia, and even farther north sometimes, you should be able to catch a glimpse of the launch as it travels up the east coast of the United States.
Cool. So, just approaching 8 minutes until launch at this time. Everything appears to be going smoothly, although SpaceX is very quiet on their countdown nets because they have pretty much automated the majority of their countdown sequence. Dobre Army says, I want to thank you for your hard work. It will mean a lot to me to get a shout out and be in a super chat. I'm a big fan of NASA. Well, you don't have to super chat because I just read your regular message. Spammy Spammerson, thank you for the super chat. Go, Internet Rocket, go. Thanks for the stream. And Kyle says, missed last 2 lives, catching up, not this one. Yeah, we're doing so many live streams these days, it gets kind of hard to keep up, but thank you for tuning in when you can. How many landings will this be for the booster, Julia?
This will be the 7th landing if we have a nominal mission today.
And there are a 9th flight booster and a 10th flight booster also coming up. So SpaceX is really starting to push the limits of usability. And Elon said at the recent press conference for Crew 2 that it's possible that in the future there could be a failure caused by pushing the limits too far. That's why they are doing this on the Starlink missions and not a customer mission. But SpaceX is continuing to make significant progress on their quest to make full and rapid usability a possibility. Of course, Starship is going to be the vehicle that can be reused quicker, but SpaceX is still getting a decent amount of flights out of Falcon 9.
It will be interesting to see a 10th flight and maybe an 11th. Curious to see where this limit is going to be.
Yeah, this particular booster made its debut on the GPS-3 SV03 mission, also supported the Turksat 5A mission, and then 4 previous Starlink missions. So that gives it 6 flights to date. This is the 7th flight. This is the 7th flight, and of course will hopefully be the 7th landing.
Stage 1 fueling complete.
Ooh. Fueling
And we just
complete.
got to call out fueling complete on the first stage. They'll be topping off that stage as we get closer to launch, but we are in the final minutes of the countdown, just approaching T-minus 5 minutes. So approaching the state where Falcon 9 will be ready to go.
Mark says, so great to hear Julia on this stream. Keep up the great work.
Well, thank you. Usually we have a lot of people on stream, so it's a rare treat to be a trio.
Thomas, do you ever get nervous that something will go wrong during a launch?
Well, the last time I got really nervous during launch was probably Demo 2. I was kind of shocked into silence during the entire ascent for that one, but of course it went well. There's always a little risk, and it's never, the reason we cover these things is because it's not so routine that we can expect it to go well every time. Luckily, I haven't seen a launch failure, at least not in person, because we've gotten really, really good at this stuff. But maybe a little bit. Obviously, when the stakes are higher, when there's people on board and stuff, sometimes you can think about it. But for the most part, you put a lot of trust into the engineers behind these systems. They do a lot of really good work. And, there's never going to be zero risk. You always got to be, when you're pushing as hard as you are, when you're launching a rocket and fighting physics as hard as you are, there's never zero risk. But I don't know. I don't get too nervous. Maybe a little bit.
And NorCal JB, thank you for the $10. Is SpaceX building any new boosters at the moment? I think so. I mean, CRS 22, the next commercial resupply mission from SpaceX, is going to use a brand new booster, B1067. So there are new boosters in the pipeline, and of course, the current fleet of boosters is starting to get old. There's a 10th flight booster coming up, a 9th flight booster coming up, as I mentioned. So those boosters only have a couple more flights in them, so SpaceX will have to replace them with something.
Wait, Michael, you mean they're not going to be used 100 times?
Unfortunately not, but hopefully with Starship that might become a thing, because Elon wants to get to aircraft level of usability, and 10 flights is better than expendable, but still not anywhere near an aircraft.
That's true. And when Thomas was talking about when he gets nervous, I don't get as nervous with crew, because I think I hope we have learned our lessons from programs past, and we're extra cautious, but I actually get a little nervous with the veteran boosters. I heard a call out. I get nervous with the veteran boosters because we just don't know where that limit is.
That call out was stage 1 LOX load complete, so they have completed the liquid oxygen load on the first stage.
Thomas, I love your view and how that's venting off of the whole length of the rocket.
Absolutely. You've got the vapors just from the rocket being cold and the propellant on the inside making the rocket cold. But you've also got some venting from the actual ground equipment. You've got that more pronounced vent kind of right in the middle of the screen from the ground equipment, and you've got a lot of venting on the ground too. You can tell that the rocket is kind of itching and getting ready to go.
Under 2 minutes now until launch of another batch of 60 Starlink satellites. This mission is designated, internally at least, Starlink V1L24, although SpaceX does not like to use those numbers in their public communications, but if you look at some of the weather forecasts and
Stage 2 lock flow complete.
as we hear the Stage 2 lock load complete call out and marine hazard zones and whatnot, these do have an internal designation other than just the Starlink mission or the 25th Starlink mission if you include the first batch of prototypes, which was the V0.9 version.
Ground gas closeouts.
But approaching 1 minute to launch, I think, Thomas, why don't we have myself do some light commentary, and then we'll let the rocket do most of the commentary on ascent, and then as the rumble stops, I will mute the microphone on the camera, and you can come back onto Discord to help us out. Does that sound good?
Yep, we'll let the rocket do the talking as we like to do. Sounds good.
Cool. So T minus
Falcon 9's in startup.
40 seconds. I am going to turn on your mic, and you can go ahead and mute on Discord, Thomas. We should now have some nice ambient audio from Thomas's camera. There we go. I hear the crickets. That's like what we want to hear. And this time, it looks like they adjusted the T minus or the exact launch time based on the clock on SpaceX's feed. So I'm not sure if our clock is going to be 2 to second accurate. So I am going to pull that until we see the rocket lift off. But just about 10 seconds now until liftoff of the Falcon 9 with 60 Starlink satellites. This is the 7th flight of Falcon 9 first stage V1060 as we see the sound suppression turn on to full power and ignition and liftoff of Falcon 9 with the 24th batch of operational Starlink satellites on their way to low Earth orbit to expand global internet access. Let's now listen in as the rumble reaches Thomas's microphone. Awesome tracking, Thomas. That was incredible sound as usual. And Falcon 9 going through max Q and on its way. You can see the vapor trail coming off of the booster. That's always super cool to see. And we will see the plume of the first stage start to expand as the rocket gets higher and higher into the atmosphere. That less dense air causes the plume to expand and kind of give a cool effect where you can see the plume of each engine more distinctly. So as the rocket gets higher and higher, you should be able to see each of the 9 Merlin engines independently. But great track, Thomas, and that's a really cool flame you can see right there. As SpaceX continues to report nominal data on ascent, so everything looking good on the SpaceX nets, and we're coming up now on main engine cutoff and spacecraft separation. If you want to come back on commentary, Thomas, I have muted your feed as you lost the rocket audio from your position.
All right. Picture perfect liftoff so far. We're coming up on main engine cutoff. And we'll have stage separation shortly after.
There, like I was saying, you can see better kind of the plume of each engine. And here comes
There's
main
main
engine
engine cutoff.
There we go. Very good.
And Mvac ignition. There's the second stage,
Nico.
which will continue on towards orbit.
We'll see this on the SpaceX
Stage
feed now.
separation
Just a couple
confirmed.
seconds behind us because we are super low latency, but there you see the confirmation of stage separation
Mvac
and
ignition.
Mvac ignition on the SpaceX feed. Meanwhile, well, look at that view, Thomas, of Florida with all the lights. That is super cool. And the grid fins glowing because of the light from the second stage hitting those grid fins.
Oh
That
my
is pretty
gosh.
cool.
That is a really cool shot. Thomas, you can wave.
Bearing separation confirmed.
Meanwhile, Mr. Thomas is still tracking the second stage. It's just a small dot from his view. But
It is a nice clear night. He might be able to catch that re-entry burn, and it is the rare sort of clear night that I might just be able to see the landing burn, maybe? It's happened before.
I will see if Thomas can track that. If he does, I will cut back to you, Thomas. But right now,
Acquisition of
the
signals
Mvac
Bermuda.
engine is glowing bright red as SpaceX passes through T plus 4 minutes into the launch. The booster landing will occur at about T plus 8 minutes. There's still some time, but the entry burn will be the next step on the recovery process that will slow down the rocket as it enters the atmosphere again. You can see on the left-hand corner, the bottom left-hand corner, SpaceX has stage 1 telemetry, so this first stage is still going up. It's now at 126 kilometers, and it's right about at apogee right now, and the altitude will start to decrease as it comes back towards the drone ship. So it looks like about 126 kilometers is the apogee for this profile, as we now see that altitude start to descend.
Well, second stage still performing nominally on its way to orbit. That's accelerating horizontally so that it can achieve orbital velocity sideways with the 60 Starlink satellites on board.
Vehicles following a nominal trajectory.
SpaceX
just
confirms nominal
realized-
trajectory.
Something that's really cool is watching the stream and those engines glow, that engine glow, and seeing it right in front of you.
Yeah. The launch night will
Okay.
feature 2 burns of the upper stage, so after this first burn finishes, the stage will coast for a bit, and about 45 minutes after launch, it'll briefly light the engine for an additional second to get into the final insertion orbit, and then spacecraft deploy will occur about a minute after liftoff, or about an hour after liftoff, excuse me.
The first stage is now passing under 100 kilometers, so that is the Kármán line, the internationally recognized boundary for space. So first stage is now, if you go by the Kármán line, no longer in space and heading back to Earth at 7,400 kilometers an hour and climbing.
Right now, I'm still barely watching that second stage as it continues downrange, but it's going to fizzle out here in a second as it gets further and further.
Well, look at
Standing
that.
by
It's a
for
tiny
that stage
dot.
1 entry burn. It is a tiny dot, but you can still see it many, many kilometers downrange.
The entry burn will be completed by 6 minutes and 58 seconds. So it should be happening about now on your view, Thomas.
Oh, I see it. I
Up
see
and
it.
there
It
it
is
is.
beautiful.
Stage
So
1
the folks
STX
that are
is
following our stream that were asking about, could you see it from North Carolina? Give a shout out and let us
Stage
know.
1 entry burn.
Look at that. Great track,
It just
Thomas.
completed.
Wow. We'll see it now on the SpaceX feed. With it
I'm
on
so
board.
We've
letting
seen
my camera
shutdown
go.
as well.
The question is, will we see the
Stage
landing?
1 entry burn shutdown.
I'll tell you what, with
Stage
these nighttime
2
launches, I get
continues to
used
follow a
seeing that
nominal
entry burn
trajectory.
all the time. It's pretty cool.
The first stage landing will occur at T plus 8 minutes and 37 seconds. So watch that telemetry on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen as first stage descends towards the drone ship. It's always so cool to see how quickly the first stage decelerates. Hopefully, we're about to see the drone ship.
Hopefully, I love the drone ship.
Stage 1 transonic.
And the landing burn call out should come out any second now.
And just read the instructions.
Stage 1 landing burn.
There's an on-board video from Falcon 9. Look at those grid fins get to work. Come on, SpaceX, hold that feed. That is so cool. Look at that, Thomas.
It's
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
Come on, come on, come on, come on.
No.
Oh, no.
There it is.
Oh.
Stage 1
There it
landing
is.
confirmed.
Go.
You've got some-
7th landing for booster
Stage 2,
1060
safe.
on Just Read the Instructions. Welcome back.
And Julia now has some fleet tracking to do, as we wait to see when that booster is going to come home on fleet cam.
And Seago.
Oh, yeah.
Meanwhile, the second stage engine just cut off. That was that SECO call you just heard. So the second stage
Nominal
is
parking
now
orbit
a
insertion.
Parking orbit. There you go. Nominal parking orbit
Expected loss of
insertion.
signal,
That is
Cape.
what we like to hear. And they lost their signal as expected. So back on Thomas's camera, Doss's favorite view, an empty launch pad, as the first part of this mission has completed successfully, but the second stage still has another burn to complete at T plus 45 minutes to circularize its orbit, or at least mostly circularize its orbit.
Roughly
but Thomas,
circularize it. Make it more circular than it was
Acquisition
before.
of signal.
Yeah.
Open window.
great camera work as usual, Thomas, and I don't know how
Always
much
a pleasure.
longer.
Thank you.
I don't know how much longer you can stay out there, but we do have a couple more super chats if you have a couple of seconds.
Yeah, just a couple seconds, sure.
CPL Daywalker, thank you for the $50 for the coffee. For Chris, as Chris will be waking up early, like we mentioned, for that core stage rollout to the VAB. Orga is back with another super chat. Do you guys think a 19-year-old will live to see Earth from space as a common person? Julia?
You know what? You're going to have to repeat that question because I was putting camera in the car. What was that?
Do you think a 19-year-old will see Earth from space as a common person?
I think so. I think that's possible. I don't see why not.
And Tybo says for the NSF Beverage Fund. And then Feely with the membership. Thank you so much for the support. But I think if that sounds good with you, Thomas and Julia, that is going to do it for our live stream today. If you want to continue to cover or follow the mission, you can follow the SpaceX stream and Chris Bergen, our managing editor, on Twitter at NASASpaceflight for continued mission updates. But Thomas has to go, and Julia is packing up because the media are not allowed to stay out there until spacecraft separation, because at this point there is nothing to see from their vantage point. But thank you all for the help this evening, Julia and Thomas.
You're most welcome, and I'll edit my photos and get those up before bedtime.
Yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in here. We're going to go pack up our own cameras, but again, stay tuned for spacecraft separation on this mission. Hopefully we'll go 3 for 3 on orbital
Expected
launches,
loss
the
of
first
signal,
two also
Bermuda.
starting off well. But stay tuned for more coverage. We will be live again tomorrow morning for SLS core stage rollout. The Artemis 1 core stage is here at Kennedy Space Center, and we'll be rolling into the vehicle assembly building tomorrow morning. NASA Spaceflight will be live from the Kennedy Space Center for that. We will also be covering Starship testing at Boca Chica as Starship SN15 gets ready for its test flights. There could be even other stuff that pops up at random, because who knows these days, it's nice and busy. There will also, of course, be daily videos from Boca Chica via Mary, so there's no shortage of content. Check out the NASA Spaceflight YouTube channel, as well as our written news coverage over at NASASpaceflight.com. for all the latest on all of the exciting stuff that's happening in space. But for this particular launch, we're going to go ahead and sign off. From the ITL Causeway, Thomas Burkhardt. Thanks for watching, everybody.
Thank you, Thomas. I am Michael Baylor. Thank you all for tuning in. And we will see you all bright and early in the morning, assuming you live in the United States. Thank you all for watching.
The chamber pressure looks good. Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantic. Water towers, fly! Flight downside, FD off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.